if you work hard and if you train yourself emotionally to deal with fear and to act in spite of fear, that is the difference between going and living the life that you want to go live and not. Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back to Case Studies. I've been thinking about doing this solo for a long time. So much of my life, my professional career, from the very beginning up until my daily activities today, factor around one skill or one capability, and it is the skill or capability of selling or persuading. And I wanted to actually take some time and break down that skill, and also to do it from the best sales book, the most influential sales book that I've ever read or listened to, that's impacted me more than any other book that I've ever read. It's The Psychology of Selling by Brian Tracy. To say that I've listened or read this thing 100 times is not an overstatement. One of the best salespeople that I've ever worked with or met was a guy named Bo Gardner. He was my partner at Vivint for a long time, and Bo would listen to this on repeat every day driving to and back from his area. And when I came to Vivint, Bo was the number one sales rep the year before out of like 4,000 reps. And so he was top percent of 1%. And so much of his success came down to these 8 principles. And so I want to talk about these 8 principles and share some personal stories of how they affected my life and how I still use them today. So number 1 is believing in yourself. This one's so interesting. When I got started, I believed in myself that I was a good person, that I was a hard worker, that I was going to be successful, but the how-to, I had no idea. And so I had ambition, I had drive, I had passion, I had hunger, almost desperation to go be successful. But when I started selling, there was this instant insecurity, or there was this instant fear. And so much of the fear, as I look back now, was the fear of rejection. Did not want to be told no. And as I've got older and as I've got more comfortable in my own skin, I've realized that this is a basic human fear that all of us share. And some of us way worse than others. But it's also something that if you work hard and if you train yourself emotionally to deal with fear and to act in spite of fear, that is the difference between going and living the life that you want to go live and not. And specifically my career in selling, if I wouldn't have overcome that fear of rejection, I never would have had a successful career in selling. And I would go as far as to say would have lived a much more reduced, small life. And what he states in The Psychology of Selling is 55% of what you communicate is nonverbal. It's not actually the words that you say. It's your voice inflection. It's how you show up. It's your soul. It's your passion. It's your energy that you're bringing to the table. And so much of this work in believing in yourself happens behind the scenes. The private victories precede the public victories. And so what I've found is when I am prepared, I don't fear. And so putting in massive preparation and doing as much work as I can humanly do to go prepare myself to be the expert in my field before I go into it gives me the confidence to show up. And so believing in yourself, I did a podcast a while back on identity, and your identity is so important. And so believing that I am a top percentile salesperson and reviewing that on a daily basis and just making sure that that is who you are. And this is so important. Brian Tracy goes through the metrics and he says the Pareto principle, this principle that 80% of your results come from 20% of your actions. That same principle applies in sales. 80% of the money is made by the top 20%. And so Brian Tracy, his argument or proposal is your job as a salesperson is to get in the top 20% of your organization. And sales are beautiful because the numbers are so transparent that you can know in real time where you stand against your peers and your competitors. And just knowing that 80% of the benefits come to the top 20% of the people. But then he takes it a step further and he says, the disproportionate benefits go to the top 20% of the top 20% or the top 4%. And so for me, early on, when I learned this principle, I made a decision that I was going to be a top 1% salesperson. And then I worked backwards into what does that mean? And what would top 1% do that everybody else wouldn't do? And it was a way different list. If I was going to be that, if I was going to have that type of excellence, then I was going to have to sacrifice in a disproportionate way than my peers. But just having that as my identity was the difference, I think, in my entire career. The second part of principle number 1 is you have to have that same belief in your product or service. You are not going to be effective as a salesperson if you don't have complete certainty and conviction in what you're doing. If you don't believe to your soul that what you're doing is the best thing for the people that you're providing services to, you're just not going to be effective. I think about my experience in going out on a mission, and I would not have been a successful missionary if I didn't have a testimony in Jesus Christ. And I definitely wouldn't have been a successful recruiter for Vivint if I didn't have a personal conviction or belief that if somebody went and did that job, it would change their life for the better. That they'd learn habits and skills and rituals and be around people that inspired them, and they'd go get a foundation that would go serve them for the rest of their life. And when you have that conviction, when you have that certainty, you communicate it without using words. You just show up and you communicate that through who you are. And so number 1, believe in yourself. Number 2, you have to focus on the customer's needs. I would say this is the biggest problem is we think that we are selling products or services. You're not. You're selling solutions to people's problems. And the sooner that I figured that out, as soon as I figured that out, my sales went through the roof. When I stopped trying to think about features of a product, and I started listening, and I started being acute and aware of what were the pain points. Where was the pain in that customer journey? What did they dislike? And how could I fix that pain? And so it was interesting. I was selling Dish Network and DirecTV and found that in the country, out in the country, outside of the city, in the city, there was strong cable communication networks, and they had what was called triple bundles. And so you would get your TV, your phone, and your internet all in one package. And to break up that triple bundle was really tough. But out in the country, though, those services weren't provided. And so I spent my time right outside of the band of the city where Dish Network and DirecTV were kind of the only TV solution. And what I would find is if somebody had had their dish for a long time, that they usually had problems with their dish. They didn't have HD channels. They had added a TV or a couple of TVs and didn't have a remote control. Their current remote control didn't work. And so just by showing up and solving people's problems, it wasn't about the channels. It wasn't about the price. It was literally about solving a problem. And if they needed another TV, or if they needed a new remote, or if they needed the Sunday ticket or whatever it was. And I was able to be a top 1% salesperson that summer by literally identifying what the pain was and being very direct and consistent with the solution to the pain. And then also fishing in the ponds where there was the most fish. And so those simple insights were the difference between me being average and me being a top percentile salesperson by spending my time in the right place and solving people's problems. People care less about your product or service. What they care about is how does this benefit me? And the quicker that you can get to the point of figuring out what is in it for the person that you're talking to and communicate that clearly, you will see an increase in your sales performance. Number 3, develop a positive attitude. This sounds so simple, but it's actually real work on a daily basis. What's wrong is what's always available. So is what's right. And kind of focusing on the good and focusing on the opportunities is a deliberate choice that we have to go build a habit or ritual to train that, especially in sales. Sales is this kind of brutal world where you're going to fail a lot more than you succeed. For me, it was, I would succeed 1 out of 10 shots on goal, or 1 out of 10 sales pitches on average, I would get a sale. And so for me, I need to reframe what success looked like. And success for me was knocking on, the number of contacts. I knew if I managed my inputs, that once I figured out my closing ratio, the outputs would take care of themselves. So once I figured out that I need to talk to 10 people to get one sell, I knew to get 4 sales, I need to have 40 contacts. And so just getting up and meeting somebody and saying, hi, I saw that as a success versus a failure. And I think not understanding that principle, you end up taking less shots on goal, or you contact less because you take rejection so personally. Martin Siegelman, he talked about optimistic people, and optimistic people in sales make 37% more money than their pessimistic peers. So just by having positive expectancy going into the day, you'll earn more and do more and create more business for your company and more profits for yourself. Number 4, master the art of persuasion. People misunderstand sales completely. They think it's getting somebody to do something that they don't want to do. And that's not what sales is. Sales is getting somebody to do what they want to do. And it's helping them understand it in a very simple way. So when I heard this phrase, it changed my life forever with sales. That people buy emotionally and they justify logically. And we get it backwards. We think that people actually make logical decisions. We think we make logical decisions. We don't. We make emotional decisions. We make decisions on a subconscious level. And then we back into that decision with a logical solution. And so if you want to be persuasive and if you want to sell a lot, you need to sell with emotion. You need to sell with your heart. You need to connect with people. You need to listen to them. You need to make sure that they know that you love them. You need to get into clarity on what their pain is. When people start talking about what is wrong with their product or service or what their pain is, they get really emotional. They get mad. They get frustrated. And it brings up a tremendous amount of emotion. If you can solve that problem, people will buy emotionally and then they'll justify it logically. They'll have all the reasons. They'll be able to put that logic together on why they bought that product or service. But that's not the original decider. The original reason why people decide is because they had an emotional connection / made an emotional decision. And then they're trying to put logic to justify it. Number 5, ask the right questions. Successful people just ask more questions than everybody else. I was thinking about the 7 habits of highly effective people the other day. I had a question asked to me on how you negotiate a deal or how you structure a deal. And so much it comes down to just these basic principles of you have to have a abundance win-win philosophy, but no deal also has to be on the table. And when you have that out, that if this isn't the best thing for you and the best thing for us, then we'll obviously not do the deal. It takes all the pressure away. But then the second step is to seek first to understand and then speak to be understood. And we get this wrong. We go right into it and we think that our job is to tell people what they need to do. Selling is not telling. Selling is listening closely and asking clarifying follow-up questions to make sure that you truly capture what are the needs of the individual that you're talking to. So many times I'll go out with first-year sales reps and they're literally talking to somebody about something they don't want to talk about. They're going down a road that isn't even the problem. They're trying to solve a problem that isn't even the problem that needs solved. And if they would just step back and if they would just listen, the customer would tell them exactly what they need to do to go solve their problem. And when I found that whether I'm a first-year door-to-door sales rep selling Dish Network or DirecTV, or if I'm selling $100 million deal to somebody, that either of these things actually have the same fundamentals. that if you understand people's needs, if you seek first understand, identify the pain, and then help people find a path to alleviate the pain, and that choice is to go work with you, then you'll end up going and winning that business or winning that deal. Number 6, overcome objections. It is the worst kept secret in sales that people do not ask for the sell enough. And the other thing that's misunderstood is that overcoming objections is about applying pressure. It's about getting somebody to do something that they don't already want to do. Objections are just a reason to move forward. If somebody's still asking you questions, it means they're still interested in what you're doing. And so it's your job to reframe the objection as a question. And so if somebody says, yeah, I have dogs, and so, I don't need it. Just by reframing that objection, I have a dog, so your question is, how does this system interact with the dog? You take something that was a shutdown, the conversation's over, and you open it back up to optionality and variety. And the people who are really exceptional salespeople, they're really good at reframing an objection as a question. And I think for me, the aha moment with this was I thought it was manipulative when I first heard it. And what I found is people don't actually know what they're thinking. I don't know what I'm thinking. Sometimes I just throw something out, and what I'm really doing is processing my thoughts. And so that reframing of an objection to a question, all you're allowing somebody to do is go process their thoughts and keep working through their objection. If somebody really doesn't want to do it, they're going to tell you that they don't want to do it. They're going to go shut it down. So there's no pressure that you're going to get somebody to do something that they don't want to do. Like people are going to stop it if they don't want something to move forward. But the opposite is usually what happens. We usually kill a sale way before the customer kills a sale. And it's because we're not good enough at overcoming objections. And you have to know that objections are a sign of life. Objection shows that the customer's interest, 60% of the top performers, they close four times more than the lower performers. So they overcome 4 more objections during a sale than the person who quits. So it's like peeling back an onion, and there's like so many layers to that onion. And so many young salespeople, they never even get into the game. They never even get into the second or third or fourth inning of the game because they get caught up on the first objection and they take it as a reason to be done. Instead of getting curious or getting playful and restating that hard objection or that light objection as a question. And what it does is it opens up the conversation to continue to work down the process. And the great salespeople, they deal with way more objections than average or bad salespeople because they're really good at taking a conversation that's closed and reopening it. And the method that Brian Tracy talks about doing that is reframing the objection as a question. Number 7 is learn how to close effectively. 48% of salespeople never ask for the order. I was listening to a book by Steve Schwartzman, and he had been a senior guy at Lehman Brothers, a star on Wall Street, and ended up at 42 years old. He split off to go start his firm, Blackstone. And he was used to being able to walk into any room and to have this brand or have this ability to just have access to whoever he wanted to have access because of Lehman Brothers. And when he went out to go raise his first fund, he was so surprised. He'd never raised money before at how hard it was. And he ended up going into the Harvard endowment and was just fumbling over his sales pitch and what he was going to go do and how much he wanted to go raise. And the guy at Harvard knew him, and he stopped him. And he said, okay, we're going to redo this, Steve. He said, this is what we're going to do. You're going to come in and you're going to say, hello, I'm Steve with Blackstone, and I've got you down for $15 million for our fund. And I'm going to say, okay, how does that sound? And he goes back and he says, hi, I'm Steve. I've got Harvard's endowment down for $15 million for my fund. And the guy said, thanks, that sounds great. And Steve was just kind of on his heels. He literally had never brought up the offer. And this guy, who was a Jewish guy, and he referred to that process as card calling. And in the Jewish community, once a year, you go to the synagogue and they announce what everybody donated the year before, the actual number. And then they ask them what their number is for the next year. It's very social. It's very public. You get a lot of respect for donating a bigger number to the synagogue. And it's a kind of social pressuring to go donate and go do the right thing. And Steve had been familiar with that card calling growing up. And this guy had said, that's all you do with fundraising. He said, the next step is you go to Princeton, and then you go to Brown, and then you go to Yale, and you say, Mr. Prospect, I'm Steve from Blackstone. Harvard is doing $15 million in the fund. I would like for, I've got Yale down for $15 million. And he said he went through that tour and went and raised over $100 million just because that simple insight of asking for the order in a simple, direct way. And he said it was life-changing for him. Blackstone is the biggest firm in the world. They have over $1 trillion of assets under management. And it was built from this idea of just being really clear and really simple and really direct in what you're asking for from people. Number 8, and the last one, is commit to continuous learning. This was so insightful for me. I read this book when I was 21 years old. And Brian Tracy's thesis, what he proposes is the top 10% of salespeople, they invest 10x more into their self-education than the bottom 90%. 10 times as much time, effort, energy, and money in developing themselves. And I committed to this over 20 years ago. And it's literally changed my life. I've spent hundreds of thousands, at this point, over $1 million in personal development, whether it's taking a week going back to Harvard, whether it's doing a Tony Robbins course, it's countless books being purchased, it's seminars, it's whatever it takes to have a process or a system of, in Japanese, they call it Kaizen, continuous improvement, constant, never-ending improvement. And when I got started, I had no skills and no prospects working door to door my first summer. And after a couple of years of being dedicated and committed and resilient and just literally pouring my heart and soul into continuous learning, I was making over $1 million a year and did that for the last 15 or 20 years in sales commissions, strictly by keeping my learning ahead of my earning. One last story on this before I finish up. So when I was 22 years old, I'd made a little bit of money and had this idea that investing was good. And I went to this seminar. And the guy in the seminar, he was my age now. He was 40 years old, and he was polished. He was so well spoken. He was really confident. And I'd literally gone to him with this idea that I'm going to give you my money to go invest for me. And he said the exact opposite. He said, there's no such thing as good investments. There's no good investors. And if you don't know what a good investment is, invest in yourself, your human life value. And I took it literally, like it literally put me on my heels, because I was going there to do the opposite. I was going there to delegate my responsibility instead of becoming the type of person that was a good investor. So I took my money that I was going to give the guy, and I went and spent a couple $1,000s on audiobooks and on an iPod. And I went and I bought these books, downloaded them onto a laptop, and burned them onto this iPod. And I listened to every book that I purchased. And I remember coming home and seeing my wife, and I just had these bags of physical DVD books. And she was just wondering what I was doing. I was so excited about this idea that if I invest in myself, that over time I'll go get the skills and I'll get the capabilities that I'll be able to, make create more value in the world. And looking back 20 plus years later, that has happened times 1,000. I've just seen so disproportionate compounding benefits in my life, from how to be happy to how to deal with my emotions, to finance, to fitness, to leadership, to management, to relationships, to coaching. There's just an endless trove of knowledge, but you have to have the habits and the rituals and the commitment to go get better. And that's Brian Tracy's proposal, is the people who perform at the highest level that are professionals. To finish this off, I'll give a quote by Ty Williams, who I feel is as good as anybody that's ever done, street sales or door-to-door sales. And he told me this quote when I was young in my career, and it changed my life forever. He said, if you want to go make professional money, you need to be professional. And when I, decided to do that industry as my career, at the same time, I made a decision that I'm going to go be the best that I'm going to go be the best that I can be, and the best that's anybody who's ever done this career. And I don't know if I achieved the second one, but I absolutely did my best and developed myself as far as I could develop it. And what happened from that was I was able to go create the value and extract the value to go make a lot of money and go put that to work, and then go develop new skills of investing and, entrepreneurship and business. And so this process never ends. The same dedication that it takes to go build a sales skill is the same process or ritual that it takes to build an entrepreneurship skill set. So anyway, thank you guys for listening on my presentation of the psychology of selling. I hope it's helpful for somebody.